Overseas basketball teams are signing specific players at specific times. That means if you're not applying in the right leagues at the right times, then you'll have almost no chance of signing overseas. So today I want to show you guys the 4 universal signing periods in overseas basketball so that you know when, where, and why you should be messaging teams to maximize your chances of playing professionally. Now, the first key signing period is going to be the off-season and the preseason. And we can bunch both of these together because they essentially serve the same purpose. The off-season and the preseason is where the vast majority of player signings will occur. Teams will have the most resources, the most time, and the most opportunity to scout players during this time frame. Now, obviously, the off-season will depend on what league and in what country you are in. So for instance, in Europe, the off-season is typically going to run during the summer months, whereas in Latin America or in Asia, the off-season can run during the winter months, dependent on the league and on the country. So first, you're going to have to understand when is the actual off-season in relation to the league that you want to apply for. So when the season ends, I would give maybe a 3 to 4 week buffer for these clubs to just kind of settle down, decompress from the season, and then begin messaging them. Let's say in Europe, the season ends in May. I would say about mid-June, start of June would be fair to start messaging teams regarding their plans for the next season. The key point here being that you want to actually catch these teams when they're in the mood and in the thought process of recruiting and actively looking for players. If you message teams when they're not actively looking to recruit and sign players for next season, then your message and your profile is essentially just going to get thrown and forgotten at the bottom of the list, and they won't come back to it. So that's why it's critical that you actually understand when the team will be looking for players. The next key signing period is the mid-season break. In many overseas leagues, there will be a mid-season pause for about 4 to 6 weeks. Most frequently, this happens in Europe, where there is actually a 4 to 6 week pause between about December going up to about January. And this is an amazing opportunity for players to look for jobs, to try to put their name into consideration, because this essentially serves as a 4 to 6 week window where teams can reevaluate their rosters and see what is working, what isn't working, and what is their team needing right now. Great thing about the mid-season signing period is that the team's psychology is almost always going to be centered around basketball. These teams are up against the clock because they only have 4 to 6 weeks. They are going to be actively looking for players. And sometimes it will simply be a case of the best situation that they can get. They may not get their ideal player, but they need a player to serve as their foreigner, to serve as their import. And if you just so happen to be that person, then that could be a great opportunity for you to slide in there during the mid-season. Third key signing period is the playoffs. Now, usually for the playoffs, clubs will sign proven and established players with the line of thinking that these players have the ability to get them over the championship hump. Usually what will happen is that a club will sign a cheaper player for the regular season, and then when the playoff time comes, they'll cut him for the more experienced and established pro. And in this way, the team is basically able to get the best of both worlds. By signing the cheaper player during the regular season, they're able to save money and cut costs because he doesn't charge that much. But once they get to the playoffs, they're able to sign a more expensive and established player who hypothetically would be able to get them the championship. So in other words, many teams may not be able to sign an established and proven player for the entire duration of their season. But if it's only for that playoffs, if it's only for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or maybe even a month, then they are able to afford that. But the thing is with the playoffs, it doesn't always have to be for a championship. Some teams are trying not to be relegated or trying not to be pushed down. They are trying to fight off going into that second, third, fourth tier. They will actually sign a player for those last few games so that they don't finish in those bottom 2 and they can stay in the first division. They can stay in the second division. And the final sign-in period is the in-season or year-round sign-in period. Now, there is no set limit or time frame on this sign-in period, but it just happens all throughout the year in overseas basketball. Now, some leagues, they're like a revolving door. Players are coming and going. Players are getting cut and signed every other day, every other week, every other month. So that means you always have to stay ready no matter what. An opportunity is no good if a team delivers it to you, but you say that you need 2 to 3 weeks to get in shape. They will move on to the next person if you're not available that next day. Now, this isn't the case in all overseas leagues. In some overseas leagues, there's actually a limit on the number of times that you can switch out your imports or your foreigners. So some leagues only allow maybe 1 or 2 in-season changes, and that's it. After you made that second change, you're stuck with that import for the rest of the year. Whereas in other leagues, there's no limit to how many times you can actually switch out your imports. So that means imports come and go every other day, every other week. For instance, when I was playing saying within a 2-month period, we had 10 to 11 imports. One import didn't even make it to training camp. Another import played 2 games and he was cut. So that shows you that these teams are constantly looking, constantly trying to improve themselves to get the team to the next level. So that's why the in-season sign-in period, it can be a really wacky and all over the place type of market. Now, regardless of what country, what region, or what league you are in, these sign-in periods are almost guaranteed to happen. Whether you're in Europe or Latin America or Asia, there's going to be an off-season sign-in period, there's going to be an in-season sign-in period, and there's probably going to be a mid-season or a playoff sign-in period as well. So that's why you have to understand when the different leagues are running so that you can strategically target when you are messaging these clubs and understanding what leagues have what tendencies. Are they switching out imports often? Do they never switch out imports? And when are most of the sign-ins happen? Now, if you want to understand more of when the leagues are running and what to actually say to these clubs, then click on this video right here. Otherwise, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you in the next one. All right, guys, peace out.